Commander Lyra stepped onto the bridge of the Unity station with her head held high. Her deep blue scales caught the light as she moved, and her four eyes surveyed the humans with obvious disapproval. As the senior Astrali officer assigned to oversee Earth's integration into the Galactic Alliance, she had expected more impressive specimens than these soft, pink creatures. "So these are the new arrivals," she said, making no effort to hide her disdain. "Smaller than I expected." Tai-Ho Kim stood straight in his new uniform, trying not to fidget under the alien commander's gaze. His assignment as diplomatic liaison had seemed like an honor when he received it. Now, face to face with his new boss, he wondered if he had made a mistake. "Diplomatic Team Earth, reporting as ordered, Commander," he said, his voice steady despite his nerves. Lyra circled the 5 humans, her tail twitching in what Tai-Ho would later learn was amusement. Humans. Such a young species, barely space-capable for a century, and already admitted to the Alliance. Some find it premature. Captain Sun, their team leader, stepped forward. "We're eager to prove our worth, Commander." "I'm sure you are," Lyra replied coldly. "Your quarters are in Section 12, Level 3. Report to Orientation Hall at 800 tomorrow. Do try not to touch anything important until then." The first week was difficult. Tai-Ho and his teammates struggled with the station's gravity settings, food synthesizers, and translation devices. The other alien species, Orcs with their crystalline bodies, gas-filled Veneri in their environmental suits, and the insectoid krill, watched the humans with reactions ranging from curiosity to contempt. Commander Lyra was the worst. During orientation, she frequently used humans as examples of what not to do. "Notice how the human requires rest every 16 hours, she told the mixed species group. "Most evolved species can function efficiently for at least 30. Tai-Ho focused on learning his job despite the insults. As a cultural specialist, he studied Alliance protocols and history, determined to master them. On the 8th day, Tai-Ho was working late in the communications hub when the lights flickered. The main console displayed error messages in multiple languages. "What did you break now, human?" Lyra's voice came from behind him. "Nothing, Commander." The system began malfunctioning on its own. Lyra pushed him aside. "Impossible. The galactic communication grid has redundant safeguards." She tried several override commands, but the errors continued. Urgency crept into her voice when she explained. "We're supposed to receive the Iridian delegation in 6 hours. Without communications, we can't coordinate their arrival or translate their language." Tai-Ho studied the error messages. "May I try something?" "What could you possibly do that I haven't?" Lyra asked, but she stepped aside. Tai-Ho noticed patterns in the errors. Earth's older computer systems had similar issues when magnetic fields interfered with data transmission. He disconnected several components and reconnected them in a different configuration. "This is an analog bypass," he explained. "On Earth, we sometimes need simple solutions when advanced technology fails." Lyra watched skeptically, then blinked in surprise when the system came back online. "How did you know to do that?" "Humans still use primitive technology in some places. We learn to fix things with limited resources." The commander studied him with a new expression, not quite respect, but reassessment. "Perhaps there are advantages to your less evolved perspective." The next day, Lyra assigned Tai-Ho to the Iridian Welcoming Committee. The Iridians were methane brothers who communicated through color patterns on their skin. When the translation system struggled with their subtle variations, Tai-Ho noticed patterns the computers missed. "They're using color intensity to indicate priority," he whispered to Lyra. "The brighter the blue, the more important the statement." This insight helped salvage the diplomatic meeting. Afterward, in the command center, Lyra made an unexpected announcement. "Human Kim will join my personal staff as a cultural consultant." The other aliens looked surprised. Tai-Ho was stunned. Later, alone in her office, Lyra explained her decision. "Your species is physically weak, technologically primitive, and emotionally unstable. but you notice things others miss. That could be useful. Thank you, I think, Taeho replied. Don't misunderstand. Humans are still the least advanced species on this station. But perhaps, she paused, searching for words, perhaps being underdeveloped gives you a unique perspective. It wasn't friendship. It wasn't even warmth. But as Taeho left the commander's office, he realized it was a beginning. Commander Lyra had looked at a human and seen something other than weakness. In the complicated dance of interspecies relations, that small step might eventually lead to greater understanding. And for now, that was enough. Taeho sat in the station's observatory, watching Earth rotate slowly beneath them. 3 months had passed since his arrival on Unity Station, and while Commander Lyra still criticized humans daily, her tone had gradually changed. Admiring your homeworld again. Lyra's voice startled him. The Australic commander moved silently despite her size. It helps me remember why I'm here, Taeho replied. Would you like to join me? To his surprise, she settled beside him on the viewing bench. Her scales shifted to a lighter blue, a sign of relaxation he had begun to recognize. Your planet has too much water, she observed. Australia prefer dry environments. Yet you assigned yourself to oversee humans. Why? Lyra's eyes narrowed. Career advancement. Successfully integrating a primitive species will earn me a promotion. Taeho smiled. Of course. Their conversation was interrupted by an announcement. All personnel report to Recreation Hall 3 for cultural exchange event. The Recreation Hall had been transformed. Human foods filled one table. Rice, kimchi, bread, fruits. Traditional music played softly. Captain Sun greeted everyone at the door. Welcome to Earth Night, she said. We wanted to share some of our culture with our new Alliance colleagues. Lyra examined a piece of chocolate with suspicion. This contains stimulants and sugar. Is it a drug? It's candy, Taeho explained. Try a small piece. The commander's eyes widened as she tasted it. Her scales rippled with an emotion Taeho couldn't identify. Interesting, she said carefully. Very intense. The evening proceeded with demonstrations of human art, music, and dance. Lyra watched with growing interest as Taeho showed a group of krill how to fold origami. Your species creates art with no practical purpose, she said later. Most Alliance races focus on utility. Beauty is its own purpose, Taeho replied. It reminds us why survival matters. The commander considered this, perhaps not entirely illogical. 2 weeks later, disaster struck. A maintenance drone malfunctioned, puncturing the hull in Section 8. Emergency barriers activated, but 3 crew members, 2 Venari and an Ortrax, were trapped. Atmospheric pressure is dropping, reported the station's eye. Section will decompress in 10 minutes. Lyra organized a rescue team, but faced a problem. The emergency suits won't fit the Venari's environmental pods, and the Ortrax's crystalline structure is too rigid. We'll go, Taeho said, stepping forward with 2 human engineers. Our bodies are flexible enough to fit in the maintenance shaft. Impossible, Lyra countered. Human skin can't withstand even brief vacuum exposure. The shaft will still have partial pressure. We can make it. Lyra's scales darkened with concern. It's too dangerous. More dangerous than leaving them to die. Taeho asked quietly. After a moment's hesitation, Lyra nodded. The rescue was difficult and painful. The humans crawled through narrow tunnels, breathing recycled air from emergency masks. Their skin reddened from pressure changes, and blood vessels burst in their eyes. But they reached the trapped aliens and guided them to safety. Later, in the medical bay, Lyra visited as a doctor treated Taeho's radiation burns. Your actions were, she paused, unexpected. We couldn't let them die, Taeho said simply. Many species would prioritize self-preservation. Humans look out for each other. And now, that includes our Alliance colleagues. Lyra studied him. Your physiology is unsuited for space travel. Your technology is centuries behind most alliance races, yet you succeed where others would fail. It's perplexing. The following month, Lyra approved an unprecedented request: human cuisine in the station's main cafeteria. The chef, my son, created dishes that could be safely consumed by various species. Commander, Taiho said, finding Lyra sampling my son's spicy tofu soup, I didn't expect to see you here. Research, she replied quickly. Understanding human nutrition helps me evaluate your species' needs. But her scales betrayed pleasure as she continued eating. Cultural exchange flowed both ways. Taiho and his team learned astrali meditation techniques, Krill mathematical systems, and Venari environmental engineering. They taught their alien colleagues Earth languages, music, and philosophy. One evening, Taiho found Lyra in her office, watching old Earth films. Star Wars? He asked, recognizing the scene. Primitive but imaginative, she said. Your species dreamed of space travel centuries before achieving it. Dreams drive us forward. Yes, Lyra agreed, surprising him. I'm beginning to understand that about humans. She gestured to the seat beside her. This Darth Vader character, explain his motivation again. As they watched together, Taiho realized something had fundamentally changed. The commander no longer spoke of humans as merely primitive or weak. She asked questions, considered answers, and occasionally, very rarely, her scales would shift to the blue-green pattern that indicated respect. It wasn't friendship, not quite yet, but sitting together, sharing stories across the gulf of different worlds and biologies, it felt like the beginning of something important. The first anniversary of Earth's admission to the Galactic Alliance arrived with celebration. Unity Station hosted a formal reception with representatives from 27 species. Humans were no longer the newest members. A silicon-based race had joined last month, but they remained objects of curiosity. Taiho adjusted his formal uniform as he entered the grand hall. The room sparkled with bioluminescent decorations that changed color to accommodate different species' visual ranges. He spotted Commander Lyra across the room, her scales polished to a brilliant azure for the occasion. Diplomatic liaison Kim, she greeted him, using his formal title in the public setting. Your team has prepared an impressive display. Thank you, Commander, he replied with a slight bow. 1 year ago, I wouldn't have believed we'd come this far. Something flickered in Lyra's four eyes. Amusement, perhaps. Nor would I have predicted working so closely with humans. Their professional relationship had evolved considerably. Lyra still maintained the formality required of her position, but she had become an advocate for human integration. When other species raised concerns about Earth's readiness, she often defended humanity's potential. After the formal speeches, Taiho found himself on one of the observation decks with Lyra. The party continued below, but they had both stepped away for a moment of quiet. Your speech was well received, Taiho commented. Especially your point about diversity strengthening the alliance. It's merely logical, Lyra replied. Different perspectives solve problems more efficiently. The starlight illuminated her scales in patterns Taiho had learned to read. Relaxation, contentment, and something else he couldn't identify. I've been assigned to lead the diplomatic mission to the Centauri colonies next month, he said. I wanted to thank you for recommending me. Lyra turned to face him fully. Your adaptability makes you suited for cross-cultural work. I'll miss our conversations, he admitted. The assignment is temporary, she said quickly. Then, more softly, the station would be less efficient without your input. Coming from Lyra, this was extraordinary praise. What happened next surprised them both. A conversation about Earth customs led to a discussion of astrali traditions. They spoke of family structures, partnership rituals, and the biological differences between their species. Astrali form paired bonds for scientific research or political advantage. Lyra explained. Emotional attachment is considered primitive. Humans call it love. Taiho said. It's central to our cultures. A survival mechanism for a vulnerable species, she suggested, but her tone lacked its former condescension. Perhaps, but it gives meaning beyond survival. The evening ended with a gesture unprecedented in Australi-human relations. Lyra pressed her forehead briefly against Taiho's, an Australi sign of deep respect. 3 weeks later, Taiho's departure was delayed. Commander Lyra had fallen ill, something unheard of for the typically disease-resistant Australi. Dr. Jinwoo, the human physician, requested Taiho's presence in the medical bay. "Commander," Taiho said, concerned by her unusually pale scales. "What's happening?" Lyra looked uncharacteristically uncertain. "The doctor has a theory. An impossible theory." Dr. Jinwoo cleared his throat. "I've run every test 3 times to be certain. Commander Lyra is experiencing a biological state that resembles pregnancy." Silence filled the room. "That's not possible," Taiho finally said. "Our species aren't compatible." "That was our understanding," the doctor agreed. "But her body is developing a protective sac containing the developing embryo with both Australi and human DNA." Lyra's scales rippled with emotion. "The genetic compatibility is theoretically impossible. Our evolutionary paths diverged billions of years ago. Yet here we are," Dr. Jinwoo said gently. "The embryo appears healthy. It seems to have taken elements from both genetic structures." Taiho sat down heavily. "How did this happen?" The doctor explained that physical contact between humans and Australi had been assumed safe because their biochemistry was so different. No one had considered the possibility of genetic transfer. "We need to keep this confidential," Lyra said, her voice regaining its commanding tone, "until we understand the implications." Word spread despite their efforts, first through the medical staff, then throughout the station, and finally to Alliance headquarters. Within days, xenobiologists from every major species requested permission to study the unprecedented pregnancy. Lyra refused them all. "This is not a scientific curiosity," she declared. "This is a private matter." The Australi High Command contacted her directly, demanding she return to their homeworld for proper medical supervision. Her refusal shocked her subordinates. One evening, alone in her quarters, Lyra confessed her fears to Taiho. "Our peoples barely understand each other. How can we possibly raise a child that is both?" "Together," he answered simply. "The same way our species are learning to work together in the Alliance." Lyra's scales shifted to a color he had never seen before, a soft violet that seemed to glow from within. "The High Command believes this pregnancy threatens the natural order." "Or perhaps," Taiho suggested, taking her hand, "it reveals a new natural order we hadn't discovered yet." For the first time since he had known her, Commander Lyra smiled in the human way. The news of Commander Lyra's pregnancy spread across the galaxy faster than light. Unity Station became the center of a political storm that threatened the stability of the Galactic Alliance itself. Ships from dozens of worlds arrived, carrying scientists, diplomats, and journalists eager to witness the impossible. "This station is not a zoo," Lyra declared, her scales flashing angry red as she addressed her security team. "Restrict all non-essential personnel from the medical wing." Taiho stood beside her, concerned by the dark circles beneath her 4 eyes. She was in her 4th month now, and the pregnancy was taking a physical toll. Australi typically carried their young for 11 months, but no one knew how long this hybrid pregnancy might last. "The Krill ambassador requests another meeting," he told her quietly. "This is the 3rd time this week." Lyra sighed. What do they want now? The same as everyone else, exclusive research access. Before she could respond, a priority message flashed on the main screen. The Australi High Council was calling. Taiho moved to leave, but Lyra caught his arm. "Stay," she said. "They should see us as united." The screen flickered to life, revealing 5 elderly Australi with elaborate scale patterns indicating their high rank. Their leader, Supreme Counselor Nex, spoke without greeting. "Commander Lyra, you have ignored 3 direct orders to return home. This defiance cannot continue. Lyra stood straight, her hand resting protectively on her slightly swollen abdomen. With respect, counselor, my medical needs are best served here. This is not about your health. Nex snapped. This aberration threatens our species' genetic purity. The human DNA must be removed before it contaminates our bloodline. Tai-Ho felt cold fear at these words, but kept his expression neutral. Lyra's scales darkened to almost black, a sign of intense emotion among her people. The child I carry is not an aberration, she replied, her voice steady. It represents an evolutionary possibility no one foresaw. As a scientist, you should be curious rather than fearful. As scientists, we understand the danger of uncontrolled genetic manipulation, another counselor said. This could destabilize interspecies relations across the alliance, or strengthen them. Tai-Ho suggested, speaking for the first time. Your people have always prided themselves on being the most advanced species in the alliance. Perhaps this is simply the next stage of advancement. The counselors bristled at being addressed by a human. Nex leaned forward, his voice cold. You overreach, human. Commander Lyra, you have 48 hours to return to Astrali space, or you will be stripped of your rank and declared exile. The screen went dark. Lyra sank into her chair, her scales shifting between colors in rapid succession, a sign of turmoil. They would declare me exile. Cut me off from my homeworld, my family, my history. Tai-Ho knelt beside her. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have spoken. No, she said firmly. You spoke the truth. This pregnancy frightens them because it challenges everything they believe about their superiority. She placed her hand over his. I will not terminate this pregnancy, whatever the cost. The next day, the human delegation received a message from Earth's government. Admiral Park requested an urgent meeting with Tai-Ho. The situation has become complicated, the Admiral said once they were alone. Half the Alliance sees this pregnancy as a threat, the other half as an opportunity. Earth is caught in the middle. Commander Lyra is being pressured to terminate, Tai-Ho explained. The Astrali consider it genetic contamination. The Admiral nodded gravely. We've received similar communications from several species, warning that closer human-Astrali relations would be unwelcome. Others are suddenly eager for human genetic research. And Earth's position. The Security Council is divided. Some see advantage in aligning with more advanced species who fear this development. Others believe protecting Commander Lyra could elevate humanity's standing. Tai-Ho felt a surge of anger. This isn't about politics. It's about a child. Admiral Park studied him. You've grown close to the commander. I care about her, Tai-Ho admitted, and our child. The Admiral's expression softened. Then you should know, Earth has decided to offer sanctuary to Commander Lyra if she chooses exile. We believe this child, whatever it represents, deserves a chance at life. When the 48-hour deadline arrived, 7 Astrali warships appeared near the station. At the same time, vessels from Earth, Venari, and surprisingly, the Krill moved to intercept them. The station's communication center buzzed with urgent messages between the ships. Threats were exchanged, weapons powered up. For the first time in Alliance history, member species prepared to fight each other. Commander Lyra entered the command center wearing her full dress uniform. Her scales gleamed with deliberate patterns of authority and determination. Open a channel to all vessels, she ordered. She stood tall before the camera, her pregnancy visible to all. This is Commander Lyra of Unity Station. The child I carry represents something new in our shared history. You may see it as a threat or a miracle, but it exists, and it will be born. I ask all ships to stand down. This child belongs to 2 worlds, and perhaps in time, will help bridge them. The silence that followed seemed endless. Then, one by one, the ships powered down their weapons. New possibilities had been born alongside the conflict, and the galaxy would never be the same. The birth took place during the night cycle on Unity Station. The medical bay had been prepared for months, with equipment modified to monitor both human and Australi life signs. Dr. Jin Wu led a team of doctors from 3 species, each bringing unique expertise to the unprecedented event. Tai-Ho never left Lyra's side. Her pregnancy had lasted 8 months, shorter than Australi, longer than human. Throughout this time, her body had changed in ways no Australi had experienced before. Her normally rigid scales had softened to accommodate her growing abdomen. Her body temperature had risen, and her typically cool emotional control had given way to more expressive reactions. "You're doing well," Tai-Ho assured her, wiping moisture from her brow. Australi didn't normally sweat, but the hybrid pregnancy had activated dormant glands. "The pain is unexpected," Lyra admitted through clenched teeth. Her scales flashed between colors with each contraction. "Australi births are typically painless. Human births rarely are," Dr. Jinwoo said gently, "but you're progressing normally." After 16 hours of labor, their daughter entered the world with a strong cry. The medical team worked quickly, checking vital signs and performing tests that had been designed specifically for this moment. "She's healthy," Dr. Jinwoo announced finally. "Absolutely healthy." He placed the infant in Lyra's arms. The baby had soft, pale blue scales that seemed to shimmer like opals. Her eyes, only 2, like a human, were large and dark. Her tiny hands had 5 fingers instead of the Australi 3, but each fingertip ended in a miniature scale similar to her mother's. "She's beautiful," Tai-Ho whispered, touching his daughter's cheek. "What will we name her?" Lyra studied the child with wonder. "Among my people, names are earned through accomplishment. But she has already accomplished something impossible. She exists. On Earth, we often name children with words that hold meaning or hope," Tai-Ho explained. "What about Mira? In my language, it means future." "Mira," Lyra repeated, her scales shifting to a deep, contented blue. "Yes, that suits her." News of the successful birth spread quickly. The station received thousands of messages. Congratulations, scientific inquiries, diplomatic statements. The Australi High Council maintained their position that Lyra was in exile, but individual Australi scientists sent private messages of support and curiosity. Earth's government formally recognized Mira as a citizen, the first of her kind. The Krill, whose interest in genetic diversity stemmed from their own complex biology, proposed establishing an interspecies research center on Unity Station, with Mira's development as its first study. As Mira grew, she displayed traits from both species. She had Lyra's ability to change her scale color with her emotions, but expressed those emotions with human intensity. She could regulate her body temperature like an Australi, but laughed and cried like a human child. Her mind developed quickly, showing the analytical abilities of her mother's people alongside human creativity. 6 months after Mira's birth, the Galactic Alliance called an extraordinary session. The agenda: to reconsider the classification system that ranked species according to their evolutionary development. Lyra was invited to address the assembly. She stood before representatives of 57 worlds, holding her daughter in her arms. Tai-Ho watched from nearby, proud of how far they had come. "Members of the Alliance," Lyra began, her voice strong. "For generations, we have categorized species by biological traits and technological achievements. The Australi, my people, have long been considered among the most advanced. Humans were classified as barely spaceworthy." She looked down at Mira, who was watching the colorful assembly with curious eyes. "This child challenges everything we thought we knew about evolution and compatibility. Her existence suggests that our differences may be less important than our shared potential." Murmurs spread through the chamber as translation devices relayed her words to each delegation. "I once believed, as many still do, that some species are simply superior to others." Lyra continued. "I laughed at human physiology, dismissed their emotions as weakness, and considered their technology primitive." She gazed directly at the Australi delegation, who had refused to acknowledge her presence until now. I was wrong. What I saw as weakness was adaptability. What I dismissed as primitive was innovative. And what I considered emotional excess was, in fact, a capacity for connection that my own people have suppressed. Lyra held Mira higher for all to see. This child is not an aberration or a threat. She is a bridge between worlds that we thought could never connect. She represents not what we are, but what we might become together. The chamber fell silent. Then, slowly, delegates began to stand. The Krill rose first, followed by the Venari, then the humans, and gradually, species after species until most of the chamber was on their feet. Even a few Australi delegates stood, defying their government's position. That evening, in their quarters on Unity Station, Lyra watched as Taiho sang a lullaby to Mira. The child's scales rippled with contentment as she drifted to sleep. "I still don't understand how this happened," Lyra said softly. "How our biology found a way to connect." Taiho smiled. "Perhaps life always finds a way to grow, to adapt, to reach across differences." "Perhaps," Lyra agreed, her scales shifting to a color she had never displayed before meeting Taiho, the soft violet that humans might call love.